Welcome to the Beehive. We are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Today we're going to talk about a really sad story about the history in Speedway. But first, like the video down at the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and start the video of Ernie Roccio. Do you remember Ernie Roccio? He has a place in American Speedway history. And Ernie was born on September 16th, 1927, and he was raised in the Los Angeles, California area. He had a brother named Johnny, and Johnny and Ernie were basically young guys racing motorcycles, learning to ride motorcycles. They were daredevils, and the Rocio brothers became famous in their own right. And Ernie started racing Speedway at the age of 17. He saw that there was a lot of money being made in the sport of Speedway. There was a lot of money in that early days. I don't know where the money came from, but there was a lot of money. And these young riders like Ernie, they said, hey, there's money here, let's go. So the riders were actually riding, following the money trail. Follow the money. And Ernie Roccio decided he was going to race. And like I say, at 17 years old, he got his first Speedway bike and start racing at these tracks like the Santa Monica and the LA Veteran Memorial Coliseum. They had this racing all the time in Los Angeles. And Ernie, and then his younger brother Johnny started riding also. But Ernie was the better rider of the two, and Ernie developed. But he was a young, raw rider like most people are. And he just went ahead and decided that he was going to race. And in the mid 40s, the Ernie Roccio went ahead and got on the racing scene in California, and he was racing at these stadiums. And he would strap on his helmet and his steel shoe, and let's go racing. And Ernie Roccio was a young, developing rider, like everybody has to develop. Everyone has to get on the seat and spend the time learning. No, Rome wasn't built in a day, and Speedway riders were not built in a day. It takes time and development, and that's exactly what Ernie Roccio did. He took this time to develop himself, practice, and he went ahead and raced at the Santa Monica, and he was just working his butt off to race. But when they raced at these events, they were racing for a lot of money, and these guys were good. These were the old timers. And Ernie Roccio was a young lion. He was a new, fresh rider. And Ernie was racing against the world champion, Jack Milne, Curdy Milne, Lammy Lamra. It was hard, just for a new rider to go against all these famous world champions and podium finishers. So it was difficult for Ernie, but he kept going and charging ahead. So that was good. Ernie just kept plowing ahead. And because there was an insane amount of money in Speedway, it was just unbelievable. I read this and I'm like, no way, that's not true. But I guess it was true until somebody tells me otherwise. But I was reading that the prize money was really big. And it attracted these world champions and the local riders to the Speedway. One track called the Lincoln Park one night had approximately $57,000 in prize money. $57,000. That's a lot of money. I mean, it's like today it's probably almost $500,000, maybe $300,000. And I can't imagine a Speedway race for $300,000. And it was a lot of money. That's why these riders went. And also the Santa Monica, they had up to $28,000 at the Santa Monica. So there was just a lot of money being made in the Speedway. They were AMA sanctioned events. So AMA went ahead and they sponsored these events, and they were really big, and they paid this insane amount of money. And my engine tuner, my first engine tuner when I first started racing Speedway, I didn't know who this guy was. I just knew he knew how to fix a motorcycle, and I could ride it a little bit, but I needed somebody to fix the motorcycle. And Jerry Fairchild, he went ahead and tuned young Ernie's bike. Jerry Fairchild, what he would do, just kind of looking back at the history, Jerry Fairchild was a good guy, and he went ahead and saw some of these younger developing writers, maybe that didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of support, but they had a lot of heart. And Jerry went ahead and he took Ernie under his wings and started sponsoring him and fixing his motorcycle. Jerry Fairchild is, oh, he's right here. There's Jerry Fairchild right there. He's actually working on Ernie's bike. Before Ernie, around when Ernie was racing Speedway, he was racing these speed races and stuff. Ernie was doing all kinds of motorcycle racing. And Jerry Fairchild over here, there's Jerry, a young Jerry. He's an old guy when I knew him, but there's a young Jerry right there. He was just a genius mind with Speedway bikes, and he was working on the motorcycles of Ernie Roccio. So that was cool. And then in 1947, Jerry built Ernie's first lay-down Speedway motorcycle. So Jerry was actually the inventor of the laydowns. Some of you didn't know that, but Jerry actually was a genius mind, and he just was really good. And in 1946, actually, he was in the workshop and developing this thing. He actually had it all figured out in his mind, like how the long stroke would be. And he just went ahead and designed that long stroke. And it was in his shop all the time. And I got to sit next to that long track, that long stroke JEP tunnel. And I was like, I'll tell you the story about that. But Ernie's lay down long stroke was always parked. It was just always next to me. And then one day I saw that and I said, Jerry, that looks like a ridiculous motorcycle. I've never seen a lay down JEP before, and I've never seen a lay down motorcycle. And I said, Jerry, what is that? And Jerry says, it's a lay down motorcycle. And I said, a lay down motorcycle? I was working on my JEP upright, and I look over and I'm like, that thing looks retarded. That thing doesn't look good. And he said, yes, Brian, it's the wave of the future. And the funnel engine is very good. When the piston thrusts forward, it pushes the bike forward. So it makes the bike go faster. And I said, Jerry, are you sure? Are you sure? I said, I think you're out of mind, Jerry. And he said, no, Brian, it's true. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. And Jerry was right, because today all the Speedway bikes are what? Lay down motorcycles. So the thing of the piston pushing the bike forward and the way that the engine moves and stuff, he had that all done in his mind. And as a young 17-year-old, not knowing anything about engines rider, I said, it's crazy. And I was the one who was crazy, and Jerry was the genius one. So Jerry was inventor of the lay-down Speedway motorcycles, and that's a little bit of history. That's really cool. He actually designed that in his mind. I don't know how he came up with that, because I still could not come up with that. But Jerry Fairchild, he did come up with the lay-down idea. So today, like I say, the riders are all riding the laydowns, and we're going to get back to Ernie Roccio. We're talking about Ernie Roccio right now. And Ernie, he was raced that laydown in Santa Monica and these other local tracks. And also he took it to England, and he was racing at the West Ham Speedway. And the bike was at Fairchild's shop for many years until Ernie's brother, Johnny, remember Johnny had this younger brother at the beginning of the show? And then Johnny went ahead and took possession of that bike. And I said, good, get this thing out of the garage. And today it's very valuable. Everybody wants to see the lay down motorcycle. But when I was a young rider, I was like, get that piece of crap out of here. And it was not a piece of crap. But I thought, I didn't like that bike at all. But it's beautiful. I mean, it's cool. Now I really like it. But when I was a kid, I didn't like it. And Johnny, he has a son named Ernie. He named his son after his brother. And Ernie's was actually became best friends of mine. And Ernie was actually used that Speedway bike, that lay down long stroke JEP, and we would go riding at Lake Elsinore in Lake Elsinore Raceway. And I would load that ugly lay down JAP in my beautiful van with my beautiful, nice Speedway bike. And I would take it out practicing. And Ernie was about 10 years older than me. He was about like 28 years old. He was like an old man. Ernie was an old man. And he was a bad influence too. Ernie was like a troublemaker or like a party animal. And I was trying to stay clean, and it was very difficult with Ernie around. But Ernie went ahead and he was riding that lay down Speedway bike at the Lake Elsinore, and Ernie the nephew was not that good of a rider on that lay down, and he was all right, but not really good. And so I went ahead and I told Ernie, like, let me try that lay down. I want to try the ugly bike. It was an ugly blue bike, and I said, let me try that lay down out. I was like kind of like almost like a D1 rider at the time, so I could ride pretty good. So I got on the lay down bike and I was like riding it, and it was terrible. I was like, oh, it was bad. And I rode that thing, and I threw the bike back at Ernie, and I said, Ernie, this is a piece of crap. I don't want to ride this junk no more. I'm getting back on my really nice upright JAP long stroke, and we're going to turn some more laps. So I gave Ernie's bike back to him, and I didn't like it, actually. I don't know if it was the setup or what. I didn't like the engine was dropped really low to the ground, and it was kind of like the balance was wrong on that lay down JAP. The idea was right, but the balance was really wrong for like a competitive Speedway rider. Maybe for a D3 rider just riding the crash wall, it was good. But for me, I didn't like that lay down, actually. I'd probably take it today, but it wasn't really a good rider as far as, winning races. I don't think Ernie never hardly won any races either on that bike. So that's probably why. And one day we were practicing over at Elsinore. We went many times, and he'd ride that old junky lay down JAP that Jerry Fairchild built and his dad took from the shop. And at Lake Elsinore, they have it's like a open track, and there's no walls. There's just dirt everywhere. But this one area at the Lake Elsinore Speedway track, it had like dirt, and then it had a big cliff. It went down like about 3 meters, which is about 10 feet. It had a wall of dirt, little wall of dirt, and then it went down. And so Ernie was riding this junky lay down JP, and he got some traction and started like going out of control. And he actually went on this dirt, and then he over the cliff, and then he went down into the hole, into the 10-foot drop. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I run over to Ernie like, are you okay? And then I'm looking down, are you okay? And Ernie's laying down at the bottom going, oh, my collarbone, I can't move. So we go pick Ernie up, and then we bring him back, and he's all like, oh. And he broke his collarbone. Ernie Roccio went ahead, and he was like messed up, and he was like, had a sling on, and he went to the doctors and everything. And I don't know if that was a lay down Speedway bike that caused Ernie's crash, but it was bad. And, I felt sad for Ernie. We took him home and, dropped the lay down bike off at his dad's house or wherever it was. So that was kind of a story about the lay down. And it wasn't really my favorite cup of tea, let's say that. And I had a really fast bike. My JP was fast as lightning, and Jerry Fairchild made that thing like a rocket ship. So when I rode this lay down JP, it didn't have it. Let's just say that. We won't talk about that too much, but I wasn't really into it, and but the idea was good. So let's say that. So anyway, we went ahead and had some good times over there, and his dad, Johnny Roccio, Ernie's brother, and I were really good friends. And when I was a young rider, Johnny, he used to go to the races and watch me race, and he's like, I like that guy. And Johnny kind of got close to me as like a father figure. He wasn't my father, but Ernie's brother, Johnny, I guess as a younger brother, he went ahead and he liked my racing, and we became really good friends. And then I was, like I say, best friends with Ernie. And then we just became like kind of like a family. for the few short years, not forever, but for the short years. And Johnny always told me about his brother Ernie that we're doing the video about today. He always told me about Ernie, and then he always cry every time he talked about Ernie. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And then he told me the story over and over again. And he just was really sad. And he said, "No, Brian, I'm never gonna ride a speedway bike again. I never rode a speedway bike after Ernie," and it was just really sad. And it left a big mark, a big traumatic mark on Johnny's heart and in his life. It's really sad. And I was an up and coming speedway rider, and then I was talking to somebody who had real trauma, and it was difficult for me because he was like my mentor, and he was really traumatized by this accident that happened. So in 1950, Ernie went ahead and raced. We're going to get back to Ernie. This is about Ernie. And not about Johnny, it's about Ernie. And here's Ernie in 1950, right there. You see him? He raced for the Shelbourne Tigers in 1950. That's a young Ernie Roccio. He was like in his early 20s, like, 21, 22. And that guy was a hard charger. Ernie Roccio was a good rider. And he went, and his first team, like I say, was in Shelbourne. And he raced, I think, for just a year or so, not too long, or maybe just a short time. And he raced for Shelbourne. And his team members were Mike Extern, Sile Brine, Ernie was on the team, and Jack Wright was on the team. That was his team in Shelbourne. And he went ahead and just developed himself. Ernie was like a lot of good riders. He just keep getting better and better and better and developing their riding abilities. And by the next year, he went to Wimbledon and start racing there. And also Ernie was the team captain of the Team USA. Ernie was just really good. I mean, he got good fast, riding in England, those long tracks, and he was cooking. And Ernie, the upscale Ernie Roccio was really getting high. Everybody was like, wow, Ernie Roccio is a star in the making. And he was just developing so fast that nobody could really believe it. And he was just riding, and he was actually the team captain of America. And he raced in the qualifier for the World Championship. They had qualifying rounds, much like they do today. And Roccio went ahead and qualified. He qualified for the World Championship in 1951. So Ernie Roccio was in the World Championship in 1951. He was the first American speedway rider to make the World Championship since Jack Milne did it in 1937, and Cordy and Wilbur. So he went ahead and was in the World Championship in 1951. So it was Jack Milne, Cordy, and Wilbur, and then it was Ernie Roccio. Ernie Roccio made that World Championship. He was the first American rider to be in that event since the late Jack Milne. And then after that, it was Scott Autry. He was the next American rider to ride in the World Championship, and that was in 1976. So the Americans weren't really in the World Championship that much, and Ernie Roccio made a part of history by making that 1951 World Championship race. But the problem for Ernie is he got injured. Ernie I think he had a really serious injury. He could barely move, and he was very injured. And he went ahead and still raced that. I guess he got injured at his team. And then he didn't do very good in the World Championship. There was like 16 riders, and Ernie got 15th place in that World Championship in 1951. But he was severely injured, and he shouldn't have even raced. But he said, I'm going to race. I want to be the first American to race since Jack Milne. So even if he was injured or no injury, he was set to be there. But all the people, they knew how good Ernie was. And they said, God, Ernie's going to be like a podium guy next year. Everybody was preparing for Ernie to rise to the top because of his talent, which is so great. And so even though he got a low ranking on the 1951 World Championship, Ernie was like, he was injured, and so he was not doing that well. And so you have to give him a little credit because he was out there in that world championship badly injured. And he's a trooper. He's a gladiator. And Ernie Roccio was a warrior. Great guy. We should really think about that and follow his footsteps if you're a rider and be that kind of guy that you're going to race no matter what. And Ernie Roccio was that special kind of speedway rider. So he went ahead and raced in that championship. And then Ernie went ahead and had a very difficult situation. He went ahead and was racing in 1952 for the Wimbledon Dons, and he had some real tragedy happen. But he was really respected. Ernie Roccio was very respected by his peers. Everybody liked Ernie. I read a little stories about Ernie, his character, because I never met Ernie. And I would have met Ernie if he didn't have this accident, because Ernie, like I say, I was best friends with their whole family, and I knew everybody. And if Ernie was still alive, I would have definitely been able to learn a lot of wisdom from Ernie Roccio. So Ernie Roccio has kind of a special place in my heart because he was the guy that I never met that I wish I would have met. So like I say, when I was a young rider, I was always sucking up knowledge and information from all these people. And Ernie Roccio would have been somebody that I would have really looked up to and I would have really learned, but it didn't happen and it was not to be. So in 1952, tragedy struck the young Ernie Roccio. He was only 24 years old when this tragedy happened. And it was on July 23rd, 1952, in the middle of the Speedway season, in the middle of the summer in England. It was at the West Ham Speedway Stadium in Custom House in East London is where this accident happened. And the loudspeaker, I'm going to go ahead and recount what happened because we got some information of what happened during that race. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that right now. The loudspeaker blurted out, Wal Martin and Kid Curtis for the Hammers, Cyril Maidment and Ernie Roccio for the Wimbledon Dons. The speaker yelled and the crowd was there. There was jubilation in Wimbledon camp. There was little hope for the Hammers. Suddenly the crowd was on their feet. This was at the Hammer Stadium. They're leading the decisive match now. The race changed and the Hammers are winning that race. Wal Martin and Kid Curtis were in front of Ernie Roccio. And it was really great. The crowd was cheering. The Hammers were winning. This was the decisive match of the night. And if they won, it was going to be a draw. It was a draw. It was a draw. The people were yelling. The crowd was cheering at the stadium. And then suddenly a piece of shell, it was a muddy track, there was mud and a piece of shell, hard shell, hit Ernie Roccio right in the face, in the helmet, and it just knocked him completely off. I mean, it was like a rock hitting Ernie right in the face, and he veered off the track, and he went straight into the fence. Ernie Roccio rode full speed at the fastest part of the track. He went right into the fence and crashed right in there, and he died instantly in the impact. It was a horrible crash. Everyone there was sad. Everyone there was shocked. It was just the shock of the Speedway world was incredible. And the match was stopped, and Ernie Roccio lay dead from that crash, all because of something hitting him in the face during that match. And it was one of the most exciting matches, the most exciting races of the year, and then everything went suddenly stopped. It was really a sad event, and it was just incredible. Ernie Roccio, he paid the ultimate price as a Speedway rider with his life. Ernie Roccio passed away suddenly, and he had his whole life ahead of him. Ernie Roccio was a young, developing, wonderful Speedway rider with a bright future ahead of him, and then it was over. There was nothing. And the world just, everyone in the Speedway world was sad. And Ernie's death cast a shadow upon the Speedway world. Everyone was devastated by Ernie's passing, sudden passing. And like I say, I would have known him, but he had passed away, and there was no way I could have known him. And it was just sad. The whole world, the whole Speedway world was just shocked. Actually, some of the Speedway riders, they quit Speedway. Johnny, his brother, he quit Speedway immediately and never went back on a Speedway bike after Ernie's passing. And there were stories I read of other Speedway riders. They actually just got freaked out and they stopped riding. And that happened also with Denny Pyatt. Larry Costa was one of the riders. It affected him, and he stopped riding for Bellevue Aces. And like I say, other people were affected by when people pass away. And they brought Janine as Johnny's wife, and Johnny, they brought Ernie's Roccio body back to Los Angeles, and then they had a burial for his body. And Ernie was laid to rest in Los Angeles, California. It was a sad event. And even the whole life of Johnny, being a friend of Johnny's, it affected him. And this whole life, he couldn't get that memory of his brother Ernie passing away that night, that July night in 1952. So it was tragedy, and it was really sad. 1 minute Ernie was there, he was talking, he was alive, he was happy, he was doing well, he was putting on his race face, getting ready to race, and it was a really exciting match. Like I say, the most exciting meet of the year. And then the next minute, he was on the other side of the veil. Ernie Roccio was gone. So it was really sad. And Ernie Roccio's story is really sad. A young, brilliant rider, and then it just suddenly was gone. Everything was gone. And just like that. So life is short. Speedway has its beautiful side and it has its dark side. And Ernie Roccio experienced the dark side of the Speedway. That's what's interesting about Speedway. That's what's kind of good about Speedway and bad about Speedway. It has two sides. When you win a main event and you win a championship, you win a big race, it's like so great. The whole world is like, great. And you're on top of the world. It's amazing. I've won a few main events, a few trophies, a few small championships. And when I win those races, they're really like special to me. And I feel no pain. It's really great. But when you get injured or when you lose your life, it's tragic. And Speedway has this incredible rush high, and it has this incredible rush low. So it's a kind of an interesting sport. And Ernie Roccio paid the ultimate price for his particular crash. So we want to wish Ernie well. We want to wish him the rest in peace. His brother Johnny, he went ahead and passed away a few years ago. So Johnny had passed away, and I believe his wife Janine has passed away. So everybody has passed away now, and it's really sad. So we just really feel sad that this happened. We remember Ernie because of it, but we wish we wouldn't have experienced this. So anyway, stay tuned for the next show. We're going to talk to Warren Reed. Do you know Warren Reed? He was a supercross, motocross rider for Team Honda. He was just an amazing rider. And we're going to talk with Greg Hazeroff. He was a 1968 early day Speedway rider of the Whiteman Stadium and the opening of Costa Mesa Speedway. So we're going to learn a lot about both of those guys. And Greg will go ahead and tell us what it was like to be a early day Speedway rider at the Costa Mesa. A lot of guys have passed away that, raced in that event. So we want to go ahead and capture some of this history so we thank Greg Hazeroff for that. And Warren Reed, after his days of riding motocross, he actually dabbled and went into Speedway. And we're going to talk to Warren Reed about how that transition was from motocross to Speedway. So that should be really interesting. And we have some really great riders coming up. we got to get Bruce Penhall on the show. We're slow to get Bruce, but we're going to get Bruce Penhall on the show. And we have a lot of writers we're going to get on the show. So anyways, we will go ahead and talk about Ernie Roccio today, his passing, his race. He left a mark on everybody. He was a piece of the Speedway history. We want to share that with you because Ernie Roccio meant a lot to the Speedway world. And he was just a big part of the history, and we should never forget him. His relative, one of his relatives contacted me, Ernie Roccio, and he thanked me. He said, "Thank you so much for preserving my uncle or great uncle or whatever it was, his history." And he was so grateful. He looked up on YouTube and he found my other video on Ernie Roccio, and he said, "Oh, thank you so much." He was really happy because he was so proud of Ernie Roccio, but there wasn't much about Ernie out there. So I went ahead and made that video about Ernie on my YouTube channel, and I blogged Ernie, and he watched it. He liked it. He said, "It's really good." And so that made me feel good. And so we wanted to go ahead and do this live stream about Ernie today to honor Ernie because he is very special in our hearts, and he was just a really great writer. And we just miss him, and it's just so sad that these guys left. And Johnny, like I say, has passed away, the brother, since then. So maybe they have a Speedway reunited in heaven. They're going to be reunited in heaven with Speedway. And they're going to hopefully have a good time talking about their days and becoming back together as brothers. So we go ahead and we want to wish everyone well. We want to wish you guys to stay on two wheels, not one, no crushes. And thank you so much for watching the live stream show today of Ernie Roccio, the legend Ernie Roccio. We will never forget you. Gone, but never forgotten. So thank you so much, and stay up on the motorcycle, no crashes, and we'll see you next race. Take care.